The courtroom is silent until a recording starts playing, Kody's voice, cold and unmistakable, exposing a truth no one was supposed to hear. Christine's face changes instantly, Robyn begins to shake, and suddenly, this isn't just a family dispute anymore, it's a full-blown betrayal case that could destroy everything they built. The courtroom doors open slowly, and the quiet murmur of voices fades into a heavy, suffocating silence as everyone turns to look at the family that once stood as a symbol of unity, but now sits divided under cold fluorescent lights, and in that moment, it becomes painfully clear that this is no ordinary legal dispute. This is the unraveling of years of trust, love, and hidden resentment, all about to be exposed in front of strangers who will decide what truth really means. Christine walks in first, her posture straight, but her eyes carrying the weight of something long buried. Something she has finally chosen to bring into the light, and just behind her, Kody follows, his expression tight, controlled, but with a flicker of irritation that he can't quite hide, while Robyn clings to composure, her hands trembling slightly as she avoids eye contact with anyone else in the room. And then Janelle and Meri enter separately, not even acknowledging each other, their distance speaking louder than any words could ever say, and as they all take their seats, the air feels thick, like something is about to break, like the truth itself is holding its breath, and just when it seems like. Nothing has been said yet. You can already feel that something irreversible has begun to unfold. The judge steps in, calm and detached, unaware or perhaps fully aware of the emotional storm sitting just feet away, and as the case is called, a simple introduction of names suddenly feels loaded with years of history, every syllable echoing like a reminder of what they once were and what they have become. Christine's lawyer stands first, his voice steady but sharp, laying out the foundation of the case in a way that feels almost too clinical for something so deeply personal, explaining that this is not just about separation, not just about disagreements, but about alleged financial manipulation, emotional control, and decisions made behind closed doors that affected every person in this family. And Kody shifts in his seat, his jaw tightening as if each word is a personal attack. While Robyn lowers her gaze, her expression caught somewhere between concern and fear, and across the room, Janelle watches quietly, her face unreadable, while Meri seems distant, like she's hearing everything but processing something entirely different and right here, before any evidence is even shown. The question begins to form in everyone's mind. Who is telling the truth, and who has been hiding it all along? Christine is called to speak, and as she rises, there's a subtle shift in the room, like everyone instinctively leans in just a little closer, because this is where it starts. This is where the story begins to unravel, and her voice, when she speaks, is calm, almost too calm, but there's a steadiness there that wasn't always present. A kind of quiet strength that suggests she has rehearsed this moment not just in words, but in her heart. Over and over again she talks about the early years, about trust, about shared dreams and promises that once felt unbreakable, but then her tone begins to change. Slowly at first, as she describes how things started to shift, how decisions were made without her knowledge, how financial arrangements became unclear, how conversations turned into silence, and silence turned into distance, and Kody's reaction is immediate. He leans forward, shaking his head slightly, like he can't believe what he's hearing, or maybe like he refuses to believe it's being said out loud, while Robyn's eyes fill with tears, though she still doesn't speak, and Janelle's expression hardens just enough to suggest recognition, while Meri looks down, her hands clasped tightly together, and just as Christine begins to touch on something deeper, something more specific, you can feel the tension spike, like the entire room knows she's about to say something that can't be taken back. The lawyer guides her gently, asking about specific instances, and Christine hesitates, not because she doesn't know what to say, but because saying it changes everything. And then she mentions the finances, the shared assets, the property decisions that didn't add up, the moments where she felt excluded from choices that directly affected her future, and this is where the first real crack appears in Kody's composure, his expression shifting from controlled irritation to something sharper, something defensive, and he whispers something to his lawyer, clearly. Agitated, while Robyn finally looks up, her face pale, as if she knows exactly what Christine is referring to but isn't ready to confront it, and the courtroom seems to shrink, the walls closing in as every detail becomes heavier, more significant, and now the story isn't just emotional. Anymore, it's starting to feel like a puzzle, and every piece might expose something no one was supposed to see. The judge listens carefully, occasionally making notes, but otherwise remaining neutral, which somehow makes everything feel even more intense, because there's no reaction to guide anyone. No indication of what's being believed or questioned, just silence and observation, and when Christine finishes this part of her testimony, there's a brief pause. The kind that feels longer than it actually is, like the room itself is trying to process what was just said, and then Kody's lawyer stands, ready to respond, and the tone shifts immediately, from emotional to strategic, from personal to almost calculated, as he begins to question the consistency of Christine's statements, suggesting that her perspective may be influenced by personal grievances rather than objective truth, and Kody straightens slightly, regaining some confidence as his side of the narrative begins to take shape, but there's still something unsettled in his eyes, something that suggests this isn't going as smoothly as he expected, and Robyn nods faintly, as if trying to reassure herself more than anyone else, while Janelle remains still, watching everything unfold with quiet intensity, and Meri finally looks up, her gaze moving between Christine and Kody like she's trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the same reality, and just when it feels like the defense might regain control, a single mention from Christine's lawyer shifts everything again. He steps forward and calmly states that this is only the beginning, that the testimony heard so far is supported by evidence that will be presented to the court, evidence that goes beyond personal accounts and into something far more concrete, and Kody's reaction is immediate, his confidence faltering for just a second, just enough for anyone paying attention to notice, while Robyn's breath catches, her composure slipping in a way she can't fully hide, and the room seems to hold its breath once more. Because now, it's not just about what was said, it's about what can be proven, and Christine looks down briefly, then back up, her expression steady, resolute, like she's already crossed a line she can't return from, and when the judge asks the question that will define everything that comes next, whether there is evidence to support these claims, there's a moment, just a fraction of a second, where everything feels suspended, like time itself is waiting for her answer, and then she says it clearly, without hesitation, yes. And it changes everything. And in that instant, every person in the room realizes that whatever comes next won't just reveal the truth, it will redefine it, and just as the weight of those words settles in, one question lingers stronger than ever. What exactly is she about to reveal that has everyone so afraid of what comes next? The courtroom feels different when the session resumes, like the air itself, has shifted after Christine's final words, and as everyone settles back into their seats, there's an unspoken understanding that whatever happens next is no longer just about accusations. It's about confrontation, about narratives colliding in a space where only one version can survive, and Kody is the first to stand this time. Guided by his lawyer, his posture more rigid than before, his confidence carefully rebuilt but fragile underneath, and when he begins to speak, his voice carries a controlled firmness, the kind that tries to sound calm but reveals tension in the pauses between words. He starts by reframing everything, painting a picture of a man overwhelmed by responsibility, misunderstood by those who once trusted him, and unfairly portrayed as manipulative when, according to him, he was simply trying to hold together a complex family. dynamic that was already falling apart, and as he speaks, Robyn nods subtly beside him, her expression soft but supportive, while Christine watches without interruption, her face composed, almost unreadable, and Janelle leans back slightly, arms crossed, observing not just what Kody says, but how he says it, while Meri's gaze shifts between them as if trying to measure truth in tone rather than words, and as Kody continues, you can't help but feel the tension building again, because something about his story doesn't fully align with what we've already heard. He goes on to address the financial concerns, dismissing them as misunderstandings, claiming that all decisions were made with the family's best interests at heart, that nothing was hidden, nothing was manipulated, and that any confusion came from miscommunication rather than intent. But there's a slight hesitation when he mentions specific timelines, a brief pause that his lawyer quickly steps in to smooth over, redirecting the focus toward the emotional strain the family had been under, and for a moment, it almost works. The narrative shifting just enough to create doubt, to make it seem like this could be a case of perspective rather than deception, and Robyn takes a deeper breath, as if finding some relief in this version of events, while Christine's eyes narrow just slightly, not in anger, but in recognition, like she's heard this framing before and knows exactly where it leads and just when it seems. Like Kody might regain control of the narrative, a small inconsistency begins to surface that changes everything. It starts with a question from Christine's lawyer, simple on the surface but precise in its intent, asking Kody to clarify a specific financial decision regarding shared property. And Kody answers confidently at first, explaining the reasoning, the timing, the necessity of the choice, but then the lawyer introduces a document. Nothing dramatic, just a piece of paper placed carefully in front of the judge, and suddenly the details don't match perfectly, not in a way that proves guilt outright, but in a way that introduces doubt, and Kody's expression shifts again, just slightly, his confidence wavering for a fraction of a second before he recovers, insisting that the document is being misinterpreted, that context is missing, that conclusions are being drawn too quickly. And Robyn's posture stiffens beside him, her earlier calm giving way to visible unease, while Janelle's eyes focus sharply on the document, her expression tightening as if something about it feels familiar, something she hasn't fully processed until now, and Meri leans forward just a little, drawn in despite herself, and now the atmosphere in the room changes from emotional tension to something sharper, more analytical. As if everyone is trying to piece together a puzzle in real time, the lawyer doesn't push aggressively, instead allowing the inconsistency to linger, to settle in the minds of everyone present, before moving on to another line of questioning, this time focusing on communication within the family, asking Kody whether all parties were equally informed about major decisions, and Kody responds quickly, almost too quickly, insisting that transparency was always maintained, that no one was intentionally excluded, and for a moment his certainty seems convincing, but then Janelle shifts in her seat, a subtle movement that doesn't go unnoticed, and when she is called to speak, the room quiets in a different way, because Janelle is not known for dramatics, not known for exaggeration, and that makes her words carry a different kind of weight. She speaks calmly, choosing her words carefully, confirming some of what Kody has said, acknowledging that communication existed, but then she adds something small, almost understated, that changes the tone completely. There were times, she says, when information came late, when decisions felt already made before they were discussed, and it's not an accusation, not outright, but it's enough. Enough to create a crack in the version of events Kody has been trying to maintain, and his reaction is immediate, a slight shake of the head, a quiet exhale, like he's frustrated not just by what's being said, but by who is saying it, while Robyn looks between them, her expression caught between confusion and concern, as if this isn't the alignment she expected, and just like that, the sense of unity Kody tried to present begins to unravel in subtle but undeniable ways. Christine's lawyer returns to the center, building on this shift without forcing it, asking Janelle a few more questions, each one designed to clarify rather than confront, and with each answer, the picture becomes slightly clearer. Not dramatic, not explosive, but steady, like a slow reveal that gains strength with consistency, and Christine remains still, listening, her earlier composure now reinforced by the direction the conversation is taking, while Meri watches Janelle closely, her expression softening for a moment, as if seeing something she hadn't allowed herself to fully acknowledge before, and Kody's lawyer steps in again, attempting to regain control, questioning the interpretation of Janelle's statements, suggesting that delayed communication does not equate to intentional exclusion, and it's a valid point. One that briefly stabilizes the defense, but the momentum has already shifted, even if only slightly, and that shift is enough to keep the tension alive, to keep the uncertainty growing, and now, just as the courtroom seems to settle into this back and forth rhythm, a new element is introduced that raises the stakes even higher. Christine's lawyer pauses, then speaks with deliberate calm, stating that while testimony and documents are important, there is another form of evidence that provides a clearer picture of intent, something that goes beyond interpretation and into direct insight. And Kody's reaction is immediate. More visible this time, his posture stiffening, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he knows exactly what is about to be referenced, while Robyn's breath catches again, her composure slipping just enough to reveal genuine fear, and Janelle's gaze shifts toward Christine. A silent question passing between them, while Meri looks down briefly as if bracing herself for what's coming next, and in this moment, the entire courtroom seems to hold its breath. Because everyone can feel that something significant is about to be revealed, the lawyer doesn't rush, allowing the tension to build naturally before finally saying the words that change everything. We would like to introduce Exhibit B. And there's a pause, a heavy, deliberate pause, as if even the act of naming it carries weight, and Kody exhales slowly, his earlier confidence now replaced with something far less certain, while Robyn closes her eyes for just a second, as if hoping, just for a moment, that this isn't what she thinks it is. And Christine remains steady, her gaze forward, her expression unshaken, like someone who has already faced the worst and come out the other side. And as the court prepares to review this new piece of evidence, one thing becomes painfully clear. Whatever Exhibit B contains, it's not just going to challenge the story we've heard so far, it's going to redefine it completely, and just before anything is revealed, one thought lingers in the air, heavier than everything else. If this evidence is as powerful as they're making it seem, then why does it feel like someone in that room is already afraid of hearing it out loud? The moment Exhibit B is mentioned, the courtroom doesn't just grow quiet, it tightens, like every breath is being held at once. And as the clerk prepares the equipment, there's a subtle but unmistakable shift in energy, something heavier, more dangerous than anything said so far. Because words can be argued, documents can be interpreted, but whatever is about to be played feels final, undeniable, and Kody knows it. His fingers tapping once against the table before he stills them, forcing control back into his posture, while Robyn sits frozen beside him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turn pale, and Christine remains perfectly still, her calm no longer just composure but something stronger, certainty and across the room, Janelle leans forward slightly, her eyes fixed on the device as if bracing herself, while Meri looks down for a moment, then back up, unable to avoid whatever is about to unfold, and right here, in this suspended second before the truth is heard, you can feel that everything is about to change in a way no one can undo. The judge nods once, giving permission, and the recording begins, at first just static, a faint crackle that somehow makes the silence even louder, and then Kody's voice fills the room, unmistakable, unfiltered, stripped of the control he's tried to maintain in court, and the shift is immediate, because this version of him is different. Colder, sharper, speaking without the careful framing he's used today, and the words start simply enough, discussing decisions, frustrations, the strain of managing relationships, but then the tone changes. Gradually, until there's no mistaking the underlying intent, he speaks about control, about needing to keep things aligned, about certain conversations being unnecessary complications, and Robyn's head lowers slowly, her eyes closing as if each sentence lands heavier than the last, while Kody's jaw tightens, his gaze fixed forward, refusing to react, refusing to acknowledge the version of himself now echoing through the courtroom, and Christine's expression doesn't break, but her eyes glisten slightly, not with surprise, but with something closer to release, like hearing this out. Loud finally confirms what she's carried silently for so long, and just as the recording continues, the tension doesn't just rise, it sharpens. Because now it's no longer about what might be true, but what clearly is the voice on the recording grows more direct, more revealing, referencing specific moments, decisions made behind closed doors, acknowledgments that not everyone needed to be informed at the same time, and then there's a line, quiet, almost casual, that cuts deeper than anything else, suggesting that managing perception was just as important as managing reality, and that sentence hangs in the air long after it's spoken, because it reframes everything, not just actions, but intentions, and Janelle exhales slowly, her expression shifting from tension to something closer to understanding, like pieces finally clicking into place while Meri's face tightens, her eyes reflecting. A conflict she can't fully hide, caught between loyalty and realization, and Robyn's composure finally cracks. A tear slipping down her cheek as she shakes her head faintly, as if trying to reject what she's hearing even while she knows it's real, and in this moment, the courtroom isn't just listening anymore, it's reacting, each person processing the truth in their own way, and none of it feels neutral anymore. Kody's lawyer stands abruptly, objecting, arguing context, insisting that isolated recordings don't represent the full picture. But the judge raises a hand, allowing the recording to continue, and Kody finally shifts, just slightly, his controlled exterior showing the first real signs of strain, his eyes narrowing, his lips pressing together, as if calculating, as if searching for a way to contain what's already spilling out. And the recording moves into a different segment, a different conversation, but the same tone, the same underlying control. And then something unexpected happens. Another voice enters, softer, more hesitant, responding to Kody, and for a split second, the room freezes, because that voice is familiar, and Robyn's head lifts. Instantly, her eyes wide, her expression no longer just emotional but startled, caught off guard in a way she can't mask, and the exchange between the two voices is brief, but it's enough. Enough to suggest awareness, enough to imply involvement, though not in the way anyone might have assumed. And Christine's gaze shifts, not dramatically, but just enough to acknowledge what everyone else is realizing at the same time, and now the recording isn't just exposing one version of events, it's pulling others into the light. Whether they're ready or not, the audio ends suddenly. The static returning for a moment before the room falls completely silent again, and that silence feels heavier than anything that's been said so far, because now there's no speculation, no interpretation strong enough to override what was just heard, and the judge looks down briefly, making a note, while Kody's lawyer prepares to respond, but even he seems to understand that the ground has shifted in a way that can't simply be argued away, and Kody sits back, his posture no longer as rigid, his control visibly strained, while Robyn wipes her face quickly, trying to regain composure but unable to fully recover, and Janelle looks forward, her expression steady but resolute, like she's reached a conclusion she can't ignore, while Meri remains still, her thoughts unreadable but clearly heavy, and just when it feels like the impact of the recording has settled, one final detail emerges that changes everything again. Christine's lawyer steps forward, not rushing, not pressing, but simply clarifying that the recording presented is only a portion of a larger collection, that there are additional segments, additional context, but that even this excerpt establishes a pattern, a consistency in tone and intent that supports the claims being made, and Kody's reaction is immediate, sharper than before. his voice breaking through his controlled exterior as he insists that this is being twisted, that private conversations are being taken out of context, that nothing about this reflects the full truth, and for the first time, there's an edge to his words that wasn't there before, something closer to frustration than defense, while Robyn looks at him, her expression uncertain, as if hearing something in his reaction that she hadn't expected, and Christine finally shifts. Just. Slightly, her composure still intact, but her presence stronger now, more grounded, as if the weight she carried has begun to lift, even if only a little. And now the question isn't just about what was said, it's about what hasn't been revealed yet, and how much deeper this goes the judge calls for. Order, the proceedings momentarily pause to allow both sides to prepare for what comes next. But as the room begins to stir, as people shift in their seats and whispers start to rise, there's a lingering tension that refuses to fade. Because everyone knows this isn't over, not even close, and as Christine sits back down, her eyes briefly meeting Janelle's, there's a silent understanding there, something unspoken but undeniable, while Meri looks between them, her expression caught in a moment of realization she can't fully process yet, and Kody stares forward, his mind clearly racing, calculating, searching for a way to regain control of a situation that is slipping further with every passing second. And Robyn sits beside him, no longer just emotional, but uncertain, like the foundation she relied on has begun to crack beneath her feet, and just before the judge resumes the session, before any new statements are made, before any further evidence is introduced, one thought settles over the entire room, heavy and unavoidable. If this was only a portion of the truth, then what else is still hidden, waiting to be revealed? And as that question lingers, unanswered and growing, the realization hits harder than ever. This case isn't just exposing the past, it's rewriting it in real time. And no one in that room is prepared for where it leads next. The judge's gavel strikes softly, but the sound cuts through the tension like a blade, pulling everyone back into the moment. Yet nothing feels the same after the recording. Not the posture of the people in the room, not the air they're breathing, not even the silence, which now feels heavier, almost charged. And as proceedings resume, it's no longer about introducing doubt or building a case. It's about confronting what has already been heard, and Kody is the first to react, leaning forward with a sharp exhale, his composure visibly strained now. His earlier control replaced with something more volatile, something closer to frustration, as he insists that the recording has been taken out of context, that private conversations are being weaponized, that no one can understand the complexity of what was happening behind the scenes, and his voice carries a sharper edge this time, less measured, more reactive, while his lawyer tries to guide him, to steady the narrative. But there's a shift that can't be undone, a crack that has already spread too far, and Robyn, sitting beside him, looks torn. Her expression fragile as she glances between Kody and the others, as if searching for something stable to hold on to, while Christine remains composed, her calm now carrying a quiet strength that contrasts sharply with Kody's unraveling. And across the room, Janelle watches with a steady gaze, her silence no longer neutral but intentional, while Meri sits still, her thoughts clearly pulling her in opposing directions. And right here, as emotions begin to rise, you can feel that this is no longer just a courtroom case. It's a breaking point that's been building for years. Finally reaching the surface, Kody's lawyer steps in, attempting to reframe the situation, arguing that the recording lacks full context, that it captures moments of stress rather than sustained intent. And for a brief moment, the structure of the defense begins to reassemble, but Christine's lawyer doesn't push immediately, instead allowing the tension to settle, allowing the weight of what was heard to linger, before calmly redirecting the focus toward the reactions in the room, toward what the recording has revealed, not just about actions, but about patterns. And when Robyn is called to speak, the shift is immediate. Because this is no longer about abstract claims or recorded words, it's about presence, about someone who was there, someone who may have understood more than she ever admitted. And as she rises, her composure wavers, her hands trembling slightly as she steadies herself. Her voice soft at first, almost hesitant, as she begins to speak about loyalty, about trying to support Kody, about believing in the decisions that were made, but as the questions become more precise, more focused, her answers begin to falter, not dramatically, not in a way that draws immediate attention, but enough to create a sense of uncertainty. And when she's asked about specific conversations, about moments that align too closely with what was heard in the recording, there's a pause, a hesitation that stretches just long enough to shift the energy in the room, and her response, when it comes, feels careful, measured, but incomplete, as if she's choosing what to say just as much as what not to say, and Kody watches her closely, his expression tightening, not just with concern, but with something more complicated, something closer to expectation. And just as Robyn struggles to maintain her footing, the tension between what is known and what is being said becomes impossible to ignore. Christine's lawyer presses gently, not aggressively, asking whether Robyn was aware of certain decisions being made before others were informed, and Robyn shakes her head at first, denying any intentional exclusion, but then she adds something small, almost instinctively, that shifts everything. She admits that there were times when she knew conversations were happening that hadn't yet been shared with everyone, and it's not framed as wrongdoing, not directly, but it's enough to confirm that awareness existed, that the flow of information was not as equal as Kody had insisted, and the reaction is immediate. Kody's posture stiffening, his gaze sharpening, while Janelle exhales slowly, her expression reflecting a quiet validation, and Meri looks down briefly, her hands tightening together as if processing something she's avoided for too long, and Christine remains still, her eyes focused, her presence steady, and now the narrative begins to shift again. Not through accusation, but through acknowledgement. Through small truths that carry larger implications, Kody can't stay silent anymore, interrupting briefly, his voice controlled but strained as he insists that awareness does not equal manipulation, that knowing something before it's shared doesn't mean it was hidden with intent, and his words carry logic, but the emotion behind them betrays something deeper, something unsettled, while Robyn looks at him, her expression uncertain, as if his reaction is not entirely what she expected, and the courtroom feels smaller again, more confined, as if the walls are closing in around the truth being uncovered, and Christine's lawyer takes a step back, allowing the moment to breathe, allowing the tension to rise naturally, before shifting focus once more, this time toward Janelle, whose presence has remained steady but increasingly significant, and when she is called again, there's a different kind of attention in the room, because her earlier words have already introduced doubt, and now there's a sense that she may hold something more, something that hasn't yet been fully revealed. And as Janelle begins to speak, the tone changes again, becoming quieter, more deliberate, as if every word carries weight beyond what is immediately heard. She speaks about trust, about how it's built over time and how it erodes in ways that aren't always obvious at first, about how small moments of being left out, of receiving information too late, begin to add up, creating a pattern that's hard to ignore even if it's never openly addressed. And her voice remains calm, but there's a firmness there, a clarity that cuts through the emotional noise, and when she references specific instances, moments that align with both Christine's testimony and the recording, the connection becomes harder to dismiss, and Kody's reaction is immediate. A quiet shake of the head, a look of frustration that he can no longer fully contain, while Robyn listens, her expression shifting from defensiveness to something more reflective, something uncertain. And Meri watches closely, her gaze moving between Janelle and Kody as if trying to decide where she stands in a story that suddenly feels more complicated than she allowed herself to believe, and just when it seems like the weight of these testimonies has reached its peak. moment of silence creates space for something unexpected to emerge. The judge calls for a brief pause, a recess to allow both sides to regroup, and as the room begins to shift, as chairs move and quiet conversations start to form, there's a sense that something is about to happen outside the structure of the courtroom, something less controlled, more raw, and as Christine stands gathering her thoughts, she turns slightly, her gaze meeting Robyn's for the first time since the recording played, and the moment is brief, but it carries a weight that words couldn't match. A silent exchange filled with years of shared history, of trust, of betrayal, and before anyone can look away, Christine speaks, not loudly, not for the entire room, but clearly enough to be heard. Her voice steady, but carrying an edge of emotion that hasn't been present until now. And she says something simple, something direct, something that lands harder than any argument or evidence presented so far. You knew, and you let it happen, and the words hang in the air, heavier than anything that came before. Because they're not directed at the court, not at the judge, but at Robyn, and the reaction is immediate. Robyn freezing in place, her expression collapsing under the weight of the accusation, while Kody turns sharply, his frustration flaring into something more protective, more reactive, and Janelle watches, her silence now filled with understanding, while Meri looks between them, her expression caught in a moment of realization that feels almost too late, and in that single line, everything shifts again. Because this is no longer just about what was done, it's about who allowed it to happen. The judge calls for order, reminding everyone of the setting of the structure that must be maintained, but even as the room settles, the impact of that moment doesn't fade. It lingers, reshaping the dynamic in a way that can't be undone, and as everyone prepares to return to their positions, to continue the case within the boundaries of the courtroom, one thing is clear. Whatever comes next won't just be about evidence or testimony. It will be about confronting truths that have been avoided for far too long, and as the tension rebuilds, as the next phase of the case looms, a single question begins to take hold, stronger than ever, if that was only the beginning of what they're willing to say out loud. Then what else are they still holding back, waiting for the moment when it can no longer be contained? And just as the courtroom settles once more, that question hangs in the air, unanswered and growing, because the deeper this goes, the harder it becomes to imagine how any of them will walk away unchanged. The courtroom reconvenes after the recess, but nothing about the atmosphere feels reset. If anything, the break has only allowed the tension to deepen, to settle into something heavier and more personal, and as everyone takes their seats again, there's a noticeable shift in posture, in eye contact, in the way silence lingers just a little longer than before. Because Christine's words, those few sharp, undeniable words, are still echoing in the minds of everyone present, and Robyn avoids looking in her direction entirely now, her composure fragile. While Kody sits straighter, more guarded, as if bracing himself for what he knows is coming next, and Janelle remains steady, her calm now carrying a quiet certainty, while Meri looks unsettled, caught between emotions she can no longer ignore, and as the judge signals for proceedings to continue. There's an unspoken understanding that this next phase won't just build on what's already been revealed, it's going to push it further, into territory that no one can easily recover from. And right here, as the silence stretches just a second too long, you can feel that something is about to shift. In a way no one is fully prepared for, Christine's lawyer stands again, his tone measured but deliberate, and instead of immediately returning to the recording or the testimonies already given, he introduces something new, something that reframes the direction of the entire case. He speaks about patterns, not isolated incidents, not emotional reactions, but consistent behavior over time, and then he presents a new set of documents, carefully organized, each one tied to specific dates, specific decisions, specific outcomes, and while documents alone might not carry the emotional weight of a recording, the way they are introduced, the way they are connected, begins to form a structure that feels harder to dismiss, and Kody's reaction is immediate, his eyes narrowing as he leans forward slightly, trying to anticipate where this is going, while Robyn watches with visible unease her. Earlier uncertainty now deepening into something closer to fear. And Christine remains still, her focus unwavering, as if she already knows exactly what these documents will reveal, and just as the first pieces are examined, the realization begins to settle in, this isn't just supporting evidence. This is something much bigger. The lawyer begins walking through the timeline, slowly, methodically, connecting decisions about property, finances, and communication, showing how certain choices were made before others were informed, how information moved in one direction before it reached everyone involved, and with each example, the pattern becomes clearer, not dramatic, not explosive, but steady and undeniable, and Janelle's expression reflects that understanding, her earlier restraint now giving way to a quiet acknowledgement, while Meri watches more intently than before, her gaze fixed on the documents as if seeing something she can no longer avoid, and Kody shifts in his seat, his earlier confidence continuing to erode, replaced with a growing frustration that he struggles to contain, while Robyn's composure weakens further, her hands tightening in her lap as if trying to hold onto something slipping away, and now as the pattern becomes harder to deny, the question changes from whether something happened to why it was allowed to continue for so long. Kody's lawyer steps in again, attempting to challenge the interpretation, arguing that patterns can be subjective, that timelines can be framed to support a particular narrative, and for a moment there's a sense that the defense might regain some ground, but Christine's lawyer doesn't argue back immediately, instead allowing the weight of the documents to linger before introducing the next element, something that shifts the focus once again. He calls for a witness, someone who has not yet spoken, someone whose presence alone creates a ripple of tension through the room, and as that person steps forward, the reaction is immediate, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable, because this is someone connected to the inner workings of decisions that were never meant to be fully exposed, and Kody's posture stiffens instantly, his control slipping just enough to reveal genuine concern, while Robyn looks up sharply, her expression caught between recognition and apprehension, and Christine's gaze sharpens her. Calm now carrying a quiet intensity, while Janelle leans forward slightly, her attention fully captured, and Meri's breath catches almost imperceptibly, and in this moment, before a single word is spoken, you can feel that whatever this witness says could change everything the testimony begins. Carefully, with simple questions, establishing context, building credibility, and the witness speaks calmly, clearly, without hesitation, describing involvement in certain decisions, confirming timelines, and most importantly, providing insight into how those decisions were communicated, or not. Communicated to others, and while the tone remains steady, the implications are anything but, because with each answer, the gap between what was presented as transparency and what actually occurred becomes more visible, more difficult to dismiss, and Kody's reaction grows more tense. His frustration now barely contained as he listens to details that contradict his earlier statements, while Robyn's expression shifts again, her uncertainty deepening into something more complex. Something that suggests she is beginning to question not just the situation, but her own understanding of it, and Christine remains composed, her earlier restraint now reinforced by the direction the case is taking, while Janelle's quiet certainty strengthens, and Meri's internal conflict becomes more visible than ever, and just as the testimony reaches a point where the pattern feels undeniable. 1. Final detail emerges that changes the direction of everything. Once again, the witness is asked about intent, not just what happened, but why. And there's a pause, a brief hesitation that draws every eye in the room. Because this is the question that goes beyond actions into meaning. And when the answer comes, it's careful, measured, but clear enough to shift the weight of everything that's been presented, suggesting that certain decisions were not just circumstantial, not just reactive, but strategic, designed to maintain control over outcomes while limiting the influence of others. And the reaction is immediate, Kody's composure breaking in a way it hasn't before, his voice cutting in sharply as he challenges the statement, his frustration now fully visible, while Robyn looks at him, her expression no longer just uncertain but shaken, as if something fundamental has just been pulled out from under her, and Christine watches, her calm now carrying a quiet resolve, while Janelle exhales slowly, her earlier understanding solidifying into something unshakable. And Meri looks between them all, her expression caught in a moment of realization that feels both overdue and overwhelming. And now, the case isn't just about what happened, it's about what it means, and who is willing to face it. The judge calls for order once again, the structure of the courtroom reasserting itself even as the emotional weight continues to build, and as both sides prepare to move forward. To respond to what has just been revealed, there's a sense that the balance has shifted in a way that can't be undone. Not easily, not without consequences that will reach far beyond this room, and Kody sits back, his control visibly shaken, his mind clearly racing as he tries to regain footing. While Robyn remains still, her thoughts unreadable but clearly heavy, and Christine holds her ground, her presence steady, while Janelle's quiet strength becomes more pronounced, and Meri's internal struggle remains unresolved, hanging in the space between everything that's been said and everything that's yet to come. And as the judge looks over the evidence, considering the implications, there's a pause, a moment that feels longer than it should, before he finally speaks, his tone measured but firm, acknowledging that the new testimony and evidence introduce a significant shift in the direction of the case, that what was once a matter of conflicting perspectives now carries the weight of something more substantial, something that requires deeper examination. And as those words settle in, the reality becomes clear: this case is no longer moving toward a simple resolution. It's evolving into something far more complex, far more revealing, and as the session draws toward its close, as the next steps are outlined and the weight of everything lingers in the air, one question rises above all the others, stronger than ever, impossible to ignore. If this is the truth that has already come to light, then what else is still hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when it can no longer be contained? And just as that question takes hold, the realization hits harder than ever: whatever comes next won't just decide the outcome of this case, it will determine how this entire story is remembered.